I'm here with Sean Darrington of StorageCraft, and we're going to talk a little bit about what they're doing in the data protection ransomware space and what are some of the table stakes for data protection going to 2020. It is a hot topic, and everyone, as has been pointed out to me, is at risk for ransomware. There have been many more ransomware attacks and penetration attacks than people will ever admit to. And there's a lot of ones that actually take a long time to notice. So there's people out there that are probably suffering one and don't know it yet, making the problem even bigger than it is. With that, let me introduce Sean. Welcome, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about what data protection has come to in 2020. Where has it been in the past? You know, people had obviously tape systems and things like data domain and the rest of it. What should people be thinking about for data protection in this new decade?
Yeah, so I think the big thing that's changed is that people are thinking about how, in some cases, not to do data protection. I know it sounds a little oxymoronic, but it's one of those things that you have to think about doing things differently. The storage capacities are growing too quickly. The recovery requirements for how fast can I get the data back only are becoming more stringent. The vectors for why you need to do and recover from a data protection strategy are now increasing because of ransomware, in addition to all of the human errors and the software failures and the hardware failures that we're all used to. But now it's like I have another threat vector I've got to think about, and I have to think about protecting more information, getting it back more quickly, and getting my applications fully recovered so that my business can continue now from different ways than I've thought about in the last 15 to 20 years.
And so in your sort of view of the market and the problem, what kinds of data are people at risk for getting infected with ransomware? I mean, is it their corporate data sets that they already know? Is it VMs? Is stuff? What's sort of the span of what's at risk?
Well, it depends upon what that ransomware infection did to a company, because typically it's not going after the core data center applications because those aren't unstructured data. They're not the way to get in is not as easy as having a pop-up banner or a phishing URL that an employee clicks on, and then now you've got a bot on a PC in the network and it's scanning for shared network access to storage, or it's looking for other file share type stuff. That's the kind of information that's typically being targeted. I say typically because ransomware is continuing to be more sophisticated and morphing about what they actually go after, including verticals, right? State and local government is heavily targeted in addition to healthcare, because healthcare organizations, they've got a fine for every medical record that's exposed. And if ransomware infects the hospital files for patient records, they're going to have to either be able to recover that, or they're going to be in a situation of paying a ransom. And there's actually a local government in Florida in the panhandle there that was infected as well. They don't like to disclose it, depending on how much data is being breached and what that length of time is that you were mentioning. They may or may not have to disclose that, but that's one of the things that people are thinking about differently, right?
So it looks like when we talk about this, there's also kind of a size thing that might have changed. In the past, we might expect hackers to go after the biggest of companies, looking for the wealthiest of pockets. And it looks like the trail of tears here has led much downstream into people that really don't have any choice. They don't have a lot of technology, a lot of staff, a lot of things, and they just have to pay to get out of it.
Yeah, a lot of times the mid-sized enterprise doesn't have the same security budget as a full enterprise does. They oftentimes don't have the same skill sets, just in terms of the number of people, not competency or anything, but just the number of people on the in the IT organization that are responsible for security, right? So the first is you've got to try to prevent ransomware infection, employee education, intrusion detection, malware, all the, I don't want to say typical, but all the security things that you need to do to protect that data. And sometimes in an enterprise, that's done differently and sometimes in a more sophisticated way than mid-sized enterprises can do. And so what I think a lot of the ransomware approach has been recently is to target the more vulnerable, right? Target the ones that they might be more inclined to pay a few $1,000s or a few $100,000 as opposed to, an enterprise, a Fortune 100 company where you're going to try to extort them for $100 million, right? It's a very different turn about the number of attacks, the success, payouts, or not.
All right. So what should we be looking at if you've got file systems and file shares, and everyone's got growing amounts of unstructured data? You mentioned state and local governments, and I know smart cities is a big thing for a lot of people, and they're starting to collect tons of unstructured data, even at a smaller department level. What should someone be looking at out of their storage and data protection systems? What kind of features and functionality do we need now to protect from ransomware?
Yeah, well, I think I would take a look at it from just a data protection standpoint, right? How are you going to protect that information, and then how are you going to recover from different types of
Okay.
events, right? And ransomware is one of those events, but you don't have to think about it just for ransomware. It's really thinking about how are you going to manage the storage, and the unstructured data is the largest capacity in many companies. It's also the fastest growing, and it's also the least well known, right? If you've got a database with data, you know what that table structure is, right? Unstructured data, I've just got a couple shares, and I've got 300 terabytes or 500 terabytes of data. I don't exactly know what's there, and I can't back up 300 terabytes of data every day, right?
Right,
So you've
right.
got to do things differently. So what we recommend customers look for is they look for a storage solution that can scale out as they need to, and they can grow incrementally based upon that growth rate, but yet they don't have to have the perfect crystal ball for the 36-month planning cycle, which we all know nobody can be perfect at because business needs change, requirements change. But they also need something that's going to improve their capacity utilization, right? Inline deduplication, compression,
Hmm.
encryption at rest is important for failed drives. If you're going to warranty them, encryption at rest, the ability to remotely replicate data to one or multiple locations for offsite protection, but then also continuous snapshots. And this is something that changes that way that people protect the data in the typical, I'm going to do a nightly backup. Well, with OneSafe, we actually can do snapshots every 90 seconds of that unstructured data. So regardless of the size of the file system, the size of the shares, we can snap a 300 terabyte file system every 90 seconds and give customers the ability to recover that entire share in less than a second.
So we're not talking about zero RPO, RTO, but we're talking get down into like increments of 90 seconds, a second, things that really, I mean, most people are even lucky if they can recover to yesterday or last week. Even then, it's iffy. Now, because you're doing continuous snapshots, you can certainly roll back to any arbitrary increment in time with a really high granularity. And that's an amazing shift, I think, in how people think about data protection capabilities.
It is, and the other benefit of this is because underneath the covers of OneSafe, we're actually built our own distributed object store, and that object store allows us not only to take a file system of any size, right? You can have a terabyte share if you want, or 100 terabyte share, or even a petabyte share if you want. It doesn't matter, because everything underneath the covers is an object store, which means that not only are we taking snapshots every 90 seconds, but those snapshots are immutable.
Okay.
So unlike the typical RAID parity where you read, modify, write that parity, with us, if you're going to write a new file, those original objects are protected with the snapshots. And that's particularly important when you look at ransomware, because if ransomware is going to infect a 100 terabyte share and they're going to write out all the new files in an encrypted fashion, we're going to do that. We're going to write out the files that the ransomware has been infected. However, all of the original files are immutable. So
Okay.
those objects that make up the original files, customers are always going to be able to go back to a snapshot that's clean enough. I mean, not clean enough, but just clean where it's not encrypted, assuming they had the snapshot retention set to something longer than when it takes them to figure out that they've been infected, right?
Right, which is a problem for some people to figure out some of those little details in hindsight. But it looks like key to that, as you mentioned, was maybe have some scale out storage and some ability to absorb some amount of data and have a history of that laying around. And I think with bigger data, most people are keeping a longer history trail of their data anyway online.
Yeah, and you can do it, when the snapshots are deduplicated against the primary data, you can keep snapshots for a lot longer than if you've got separate volumes where you're copying
Okay.
the entire share, and now you're duplicating or triplicating the amount of capacity you need to protect, right? And when you have everything deduplicated, it gives organizations a lot of flexibility to keep those retentions a little bit longer. But obviously, you don't want to go too long based upon the company's policy of discovery and stuff like that. But going from 3 months to a year to multiple years is definitely plausible.
All right, so talk to me a little bit. I mean, this is great because you're bringing these fully, what I would think of as really high end enterprise features of that 1 second, 90-second granularities down to a mid-range enterprise that doesn't have a lot of experienced data protection staff lying around. That's great. But tell me a little bit about how you might recover. So now I notice this. I notice I have a problem. So someone says, "Hey, your ransomware. Here's your ransom. Do you want to pay it?"
Yeah.
What's involved in recovering?
Yeah, so it depends upon what they want to recover from. So, with the managing the unstructured data, OneSafe will take snapshots every 90 seconds, as we discussed. But OneSafe is also a converged solution that includes not only the scale-out storage, but also the full data protection capability. So now organizations can protect their VMs or physical servers, and they can take a snapshot of the VM every 15 minutes or an hour, depending upon what they would like to set that to, and they can actually recover from just a VM corruption, right? And begin that recovery process in less than a second. With Virtualboots, a patent that we have where it enables organizations to recover VM, you don't need to stage a new VM. You just actually boot that VM from OneSafe, and in less than a second, that VM is booting, and it's actually recovering the data that the application needs as the application is using it. And it's restoring the data back to the primary data store in the background. And then when you're done, the application is done using it, or has gone through all the data, or we've recovered the data in the background to the primary NFS data store. You don't have to do any vMotion afterwards. You're done, right? So we've simplified that recovery process a lot for organizations that want to recover a physical server or a VM.
Right, and then obviously you can clone back the file shares. That happens in a second if you clone them back. You can start to recover a VM in under a second, and I suppose it depends on the VM and what it's doing. But for some workloads, people might not even notice that it was gone if you can recover fast enough.
Yeah, well, it's not if you can recover fast enough, right? Because that application is up and running. It's just a question of what the response time is.
Okay,
and so if performance is a key factor for organizations, OneSafe, we have hard drive-based models, appliances, but also all flash. And so we have a lot of customers that actually use the OneSafe all flash solution because we're so price competitive and we make flash affordable for every organization, right? And with these features, you can actually do a recovery from an all flash backup target and recover back to the primary storage, maybe even higher end than that. But in the meantime, your application's up and running, and it's just response time that you're noticing. It's not anything else.
Right. So we can do that recovery. We can get back online. It sounds really great. And to get started, and I know you're not a solution that requires a huge footprint. You mentioned you can get storage. What's sort of the minimum kind of footprint to get started?
Yeah, the minimum footprint is a single node, and you can scale out from there. You can add a single node and then add a second node, or third, fourth, fifth, sixth. You can get up to petabytes of capacity. So to get in, it's really depends upon what your requirements are. We have customers that have a handful of terabytes in a single node cluster, but because of our data protection, continuous snapshots, deduplication, et cetera, they can make that justification to spend something that's not the cheapest on the market, but certainly not the most expensive. But then, if you've got a 50 terabyte problem or 100 terabyte problem or multi-100 terabyte problem, you just scale the storage as you need to.
All right, and we're sort of running to the end of our segment here, but I got one kind of more last interesting question. So if I've got some other kinds of problems for data protection, like disaster recovery, like it's not just ransomware or what else, and I want to recover to a cloud, can I do that? Can I recover to somewhere else?
Yeah, you can do different types of recovery. So if you have a second data center yourself, you can replicate from OneSafe to one or multiple other data centers in a one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many design as you'd like to.
Okay.
And that would protect not only the unstructured data in the snapshots, but also if you're doing backup of VMs and physical servers in one location, you can replicate those backup jobs to another OneSafe in another data center location that you have, or you can replicate those into StorageCraft's cloud.
Okay, you have
from there, you can actually do full DR as a service, right? So if you're an organization that doesn't have a second data center infrastructure, you can actually recover those applications in that same one virtual boot approach, where it's it's not going to be instantaneous, but it's actually going to be very quick, and you can orchestrate which VMs you want to recover in what order. So a full DR as a service, right? The site's no longer there as opposed to just individual app. Or you can go to just replicate the storage itself, the backup storage to like S3 or GCP.
So I can start with one node. I can get a full DR as a service, so I don't need a second data center data site. I can protect my unstructured data. I can protect my VMs, and I can recover those things in minutes rather than days or hours and seconds. And I can do this at a very economical price because a lot of the things that StorageCraft has focused on over the years in keeping prices down on capacity. So I like the story, I like the story, Sean.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Any final words? You want to add anything?
No, you just mentioned like, lower cost. So
Yeah.
from a storage perspective, if you look at 36 months, the OneSafe scale out storage solution with the software and everything is included as part of this calculation. It's actually less expensive than Amazon S3 storage. So it's about $0.015 to 2 cents a gig per month.
Yeah, how can you not like that when
Yeah.
you like that storage utility pricing? All right, thank you very much, Sean, for being here today from StorageCraft.
Great, thanks, Mike.